I still remember the exact second the room went silent. The Christmas lights were blinking softly against the window, the smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey filling the house I had paid for, decorated, and tried so hard to turn into a home. We were gathered around the dining table when my stepson looked at me, not with anger, not even with teenage sarcasm, but with something colder. "There's no place for outsiders at Christmas," he said. And everyone froze. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't, because the truth is, I had spent the last 6 years convincing myself I wasn't one. When I married Laura, I knew I wasn't just choosing her, I was choosing her son, Daniel. He was 12 back then. Quiet, watchful, the kind of kid who studied you before deciding whether you were safe. I respected that about him. His father had left years before I entered the picture. Not dramatically, just slowly. Fewer calls, missed birthdays, eventually silence. Daniel never talked about it, but I could see the wound behind his politeness. I never tried to replace his dad. I made that clear from the start. "I'm not here to take anyone's place," I told him once, about 3 months after the wedding. "I'm just here to stand beside you. That's it." He nodded, but he didn't smile. Trust with a child like Daniel wasn't something you demanded. It was something you earned, inch by inch. I showed up. Soccer practice every Saturday morning, even when it rained. Parent-teacher meetings when Laura couldn't leave work early. Late-night math homework sessions at the kitchen counter, both of us pretending we weren't equally confused. When he got the flu one winter, I slept on the hallway floor outside his room because he was too embarrassed to admit he was scared of being alone when he was sick. He never thanked me for that. But the next morning, he asked if I could make his oatmeal instead of his mom. That felt like progress. Over the years, something like normalcy settled over us. We weren't the kind of family that laughed loudly or hugged constantly. Ours was quieter, subtle, safe. At least, I thought it was. Laura used to tell me, "He respects you. That's his way of caring." And I believed her. When Daniel turned 16, he started calling me if he was going to be late. Not his mom, me. "Hey, we're staying after practice. Don't wait up." Small things like that mattered more than he realized. I helped him open his first bank account. I co-signed for his first used car. I taught him how to check the oil, how to budget his allowance, how to shake someone's hand properly during a job interview. There were moments, quiet ones, when I thought maybe, just maybe, he saw me as something more than the man who married his mother. But there were also moments that made me pause. Like the way he would sometimes introduce me to friends. "This is Mark. My mom's husband." Not stepdad, not family, just Mark. I told myself not to read into it. Teenagers are complicated. Labels are complicated. I remembered being 17, convinced the world was temporary and adults were just background noise. Still, the word outsider had never crossed my mind. Until Christmas Eve. This year felt different from the start. Daniel had just turned 18 2 months earlier. Legally an adult, he'd gotten a part-time job at an electronics store, was saving for college, talking about moving into a dorm next fall. He seemed distant lately, not hostile, just elsewhere. Always texting, always half present at dinner. Laura noticed it too. "He's growing up," she told me one night while we wrapped presents in the living room. "It's normal." I nodded, but something in my chest felt unsettled. Christmas had always been my favorite holiday. Not because of the gifts, but because of the illusion of unity. One day a year where everyone sat at the same table, put their differences aside, and chose warmth. I spent weeks planning it. I picked out Daniel's gift carefully, a high-end laptop he'd been eyeing for college. It cost more than I should have spent, but I wanted him to feel supported. Scene. On Christmas morning, he thanked me politely. "Thanks," he said, running his hand over the box. "This is generous. Generous. Not thoughtful. Not amazing. Generous." I brushed it off. By evening, Laura's sister and her husband had come over. The house was full but not chaotic. Wine glasses clinked. Holiday music hummed in the background. Daniel had been unusually quiet all day. At dinner, Laura raised her glass. "To family," she said warmly. Through everything, everyone echoed it. I lifted my glass too. That's when Daniel spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam anything. He just set his fork down carefully and said, "Family means everyone belongs. No outsiders." His eyes were on me. The table went still. Laura let out a nervous laugh. "Daniel, what are you talking about?" He shrugged. "Just saying, Christmas should be for real family." Real. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet, just a sudden, hollow awareness. I could have ignored it, smiled, changed the subject, but 6 years of effort, of showing up, paying bills, fixing broken sinks at midnight, sitting through school plays, funding dreams, pressed against my ribs. I looked at him calmly. If I'm an outsider, I said quietly, then maybe it's time you start handling your own expenses. Laura turned to me sharply. Mark. No, I continued, still keeping my voice level. College fund, car insurance, phone plan, I'm happy to help family. But if I don't belong here. The room felt smaller. Daniel's jaw tightened. Not shocked, not ashamed, almost prepared. That was the part that scared me. He didn't argue immediately. He didn't backtrack. He just leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and looked at his mother instead of me. See, he said softly, I told you. Told you what? My heartbeat slowed in that strange way it does before something breaks, not loudly, but permanently. Laura's face had gone pale. She wasn't looking at Daniel. She was looking at the table. And in that moment, a quiet, terrible thought surfaced. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't teenage moodiness. This had been discussed, planned. The Christmas lights blinked again, reflecting faintly in the window behind Daniel's head. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't feel like part of the room. I felt like a guest who had overstayed. And as Laura finally opened her mouth to speak, her voice trembling in a way I had never heard before, I realized I might have misunderstood my place in this family all along. But what she said next, that's when everything truly began to unravel. Laura's fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Her voice didn't rise. It barely carried across the table. Mark, we need to talk. Not don't do this. Not Daniel didn't mean it. Not you're not an outsider. We need to talk. 6 years together, and I knew the difference between panic and preparation. This wasn't surprise. This was inevitability. Daniel stood up first. I'm going to my room, he said calmly, pushing his chair in with careful precision. He didn't look at me. Not once. We can finish this later. Finish this. The word echoed long after he disappeared down the hallway. Laura's sister cleared her throat awkwardly. Her husband suddenly found deep interest in his mashed potatoes. The room had turned into a stage, and I was the only one who hadn't received the script. Maybe we should give you two some space, her sister murmured. Within minutes, the house was quiet again. The holiday music had ended mid-song. The tree lights blinked against walls that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Laura remained seated across from me. She looked exhausted, not guilty, not angry, tired. How long? I asked. She swallowed. Since the fall. My chest tightened. Since the fall, I repeated slowly. You've been planning something since the fall. It's not like that. Then what is it like? She stood and walked to the window, arms wrapped around herself. Daniel wants to reconnect with his father. The words landed gently, but they landed hard. I know, I said carefully. He mentioned getting a message from him a few months ago. She nodded. They've been talking more than you think. A quiet realization began forming. That's why he's been distant. Yes, I breathed out slowly. Okay, I understand that. He has a right to that. Laura turned toward me then, and her eyes were shining, not with tears, but with something heavier. His father wants him to move in with him next year. Out of state. That stung. But it wasn't betrayal. It was change. And, I asked, and Daniel feels like he can't fully do that while, financially depending on you. I frowned. Depending on me. I offered to help. That was never leverage. I know that, she said quickly. But his father doesn't see it that way. There it was. The unseen presence at our table. What does he see it as? Laura hesitated. He thinks you're trying to replace him. That by paying for things, by being there, you've positioned yourself. I actually laughed. It came out hollow. Positioned myself. Laura, I showed up because no one else did. I know. Do you? I asked quietly. Silence. The room felt smaller with every second. So tonight, I continued slowly, Daniel wasn't just making a comment. He was drawing a line. Laura nodded once. He feels guilty, she said. About taking your help while rebuilding things with his dad. He feels like he's betraying someone no matter what he chooses. And calling me an outsider fixes that. He thought if you stepped back financially, it would make the transition cleaner. Cleaner. Like I was paperwork to file away. I stared at the Christmas tree. At the ornaments Daniel and I had hung together every year. At the small wooden reindeer he made in middle school woodshop that still leaned slightly to the left because he refused to sand it properly. I remembered the night he failed his driving test the first time. How he sat in the garage afterward, staring at the dashboard, trying not to cry. You don't quit because you're embarrassed, I told him then. You retake it. He had looked at me differently that night. Or maybe I imagined that too. So what was the plan? I asked Laura, my voice steady despite the pressure building inside my chest. Push me until I react. So I'm the one who pulls funding, so I become the villain. No, she whispered. It wasn't supposed to go like this. How was it supposed to go? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I stood from the table and walked slowly toward the hallway. Each step felt deliberate, like crossing an invisible threshold. Where are you going? She asked. To talk to him. Laura didn't try to stop me. Daniel's door was closed. Light spilled from underneath. I knocked once. Yeah, I opened the door gently. His room looked the same, half-packed boxes near the closet, college brochures scattered across his desk. But there was something new on the nightstand. A framed photo. Daniel and his father. Recent. They were standing outside some cafe, smiling. The resemblance between them was undeniable. Daniel followed my gaze. He came to visit in October, he said evenly. I nodded. I figured. An uncomfortable quiet settled between us. I never tried to replace him, I said finally. I know. Then why make me the outsider? He leaned back in his chair. Because if I don't, he said carefully, then I have to admit you're not. That hit deeper than I expected. You think caring about me betrays him? I asked. His jaw tightened. You don't get it. Then help me understand. He stood up, pacing once before stopping in front of his desk. He left, Daniel said, his voice controlled but strained. For years. And now he's trying. He says he didn't fight harder before because he didn't want to disrupt Mom's new life. He says he thought I'd be better off without conflict. And you believe him? I want to. There it was. Not certainty. Hope. If I keep taking your help, Daniel continued, if I keep letting you pay for everything, then what does that say? That he failed. That you stepped in because he couldn't. I studied him carefully. You think I kept score? I asked quietly. He didn't answer. Daniel, I said, every soccer practice, every late-night homework session, that wasn't a competition. That was me choosing to be there. He looked away. I didn't ask you to. No, I agreed softly. You didn't. The distance between us felt measurable now. Not explosive, not dramatic, just deliberate. So what happens now? I asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. I'm going to move in with him after graduation, he said. We've already talked about it. You and your mom. His silence confirmed it. And tonight? I asked. What was tonight supposed to accomplish? He hesitated. I thought if you pulled back, it would make it easier. For who? He didn't answer that either. I stood there for a long moment, memorizing his face, the boy I had watched grow into someone standing in front of me like a stranger with familiar eyes. I would have helped you leave with support, I said finally. Not because I needed you to stay, but because that's what family does. Daniel's expression flickered, just for a second. Conflict, doubt, but it passed. I guess we see family differently, he said quietly. And in that moment, I realized something far heavier than anger. This wasn't about money. This wasn't even about his father. This was about identity, and someone had convinced him there could only be one place at the table. I nodded once. All right, I said. I turned toward the door. Mark, he called out suddenly. I paused. For the first time that night, his voice wasn't guarded. It was uncertain. If I don't take your help anymore, does that mean you're done? I looked at him, really looked at him, and I understood then that this wasn't a simple rejection. It was a test, of loyalty, of pride, of whether I would fight for a place I was never officially given. I held the doorknob, feeling the weight of 6 years pressing into a single decision. And that's when I realized, the real question wasn't whether I was an outsider, it was whether I was willing to become one.